I found out on our anniversary. That wasn't a coincidence. She left her email open on the living room iPad, something she never did. She's meticulous with technology. Cautious. Private. But that night, she went upstairs to run a bath, and her Gmail inbox was sitting there, practically glowing. It was like the universe wanted me to see it. What I found wasn't just an affair. It was a plan. A carefully coordinated strategy to leave me after she'd collected her annual bonus. After she'd cashed in our joint equity payout. After she'd quietly funneled money into a separate account under her maiden name, something I hadn't seen since her grad school days. My name is Ethan Marks. I'm 42. I'm a contracts attorney for a mid-sized tech firm in Raleigh, North Carolina. And until 6 months ago, I thought my wife, Lana, and I were in a good place. Busy, yes, but solid. We had a system. She handled marketing for a boutique architecture firm, and I worked remote 3 days a week, managing mergers and supplier agreements. We didn't fight. We didn't drift. At least, I didn't think so. But the thing about being a contracts guy? I noticed patterns, timelines, changes in behavior. And Lana, she'd started to shift. It started small. Last fall, she began taking client calls in the car instead of the home office. Then there were late design reviews on nights that never used to require overtime. Her wardrobe changed subtly, more statement pieces, more lipstick on weekdays. At first, I chalked it up to mid-career confidence. I was even proud. Encouraging. But patterns are patterns. The email was titled Discovery Day Confirmed. It had a PDF attached. The body was brief. We're on track. His Q1 payout clears by March 30th. Let's meet April 7th like we said. Just act normal until then. I'll call you after. It was from her coworker, Brandon. I recognized the name because he'd come to our house once. Christmas 2 years ago. He brought bourbon and a smug smile and talked about brutalist form language until I nearly poured his drink on the carpet. That night, in my quiet living room, I opened the PDF. It was a project plan. Not for work, for me. Timeline. Key dates. Financial milestones. A full month-by-month breakdown of how to maximize the split and minimize his objections. They'd even color-coded the risk factors. I sat there for a full hour, scrolling, reading, memorizing. My lawyer brain kicked and automatically annotating, decoding intent, running scenarios. It didn't feel like a betrayal yet. Not emotionally. It felt like evidence. A deposition in slow motion. And then, at the bottom of the document, in bold, file divorce papers no earlier than April 8th, 9 a.m. I looked at the date on my phone. March 20th. 19 days. That was how long I had to decide who I was going to be. Lana didn't know I'd seen the email. She came downstairs in her robe, kissed my temple like nothing had changed, and asked if I wanted to share a glass of wine in bed. I said no. I told her I had work. I kissed her back, gently, and sat there for another hour after she went up, staring at the glowing iPad screen, wondering what the hell had happened to my marriage. It's strange how calm you can feel in the face of something devastating. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I wrote. That night, I opened a private Google Drive and started documenting. Emails, screenshots, financial transfers, asset schedules. I cross-referenced the calendar events she thought were deleted. I retrieved metadata she didn't realize was stored on shared iCloud notes. I downloaded the spreadsheet she'd saved as Q1 Client Tracker in a hidden folder. There were no clients listed. Only line items like Venmo split pre-April. Asset leverage. Don't trigger prenup clause 4.2 before March 30th. Emotionally passive equals lower mediation cost. I'd written that prenup. For us. 5 years into the marriage, when she launched her startup. She'd wanted protection, understandably. So I built a clean agreement with contingencies, payouts, and escalation clauses. It was airtight. But now, she was weaponizing my own language against me. And I'll be honest, part of me admired it. For about 10 seconds. Then I started planning. Over the next week, I became two people. The husband she thought she was stringing along and the lawyer building a case behind her back. I updated my personal retainer with a high-level family attorney, Allison Cho. She and I had worked adjacent cases before. She specialized in high-asset dissolutions and prenup enforcement. Quiet. Precise. Cold when necessary. I sent her the PDF with the subject line, Breach of Marital Contract, Preliminary. She called me the next morning and said 6 words. We're going to destroy them legally. I didn't want drama. I wanted leverage. I wanted facts. I wanted control. We reviewed the prenup together. I had inserted language years ago, almost as an afterthought, about premeditated financial manipulation nullifying certain payout triggers. Clause 4.2. She'd referenced it herself in the spreadsheet. She knew it was real. She was just banking on me never knowing what she was doing until it was too late. She had no idea I'd see her cards before the flop. By April 1st, I'd reconstructed their entire digital timeline. Emails, meeting logs, messaging patterns. Brandon had used Signal for most of their exchanges, but Lana hadn't fully scrubbed her backups. Her iCloud contained synced screenshots, drafts, even a voice memo she recorded about navigating the mediation gracefully. Mediation. They wanted a clean exit. No lawyers. No court. No spotlight. So I gave them what they wanted on paper. I sent Lana flowers on April 6th. Orchids. Her favorite. I made dinner that night. Her favorite risotto. I poured her wine. I smiled. I told her I'd cleared my schedule next week if she wanted to get out of town. She said, "That sounds amazing," and kissed me like she still loved me. The next morning, she served me coffee and divorce papers. April 8th, 9:03 a.m. Right on schedule. She looked nervous but prepared. She handed me the envelope like it was a gift. Told me she wanted things to be amicable. Said she hoped we could honor what we built. I thanked her. I smiled. I signed the receipt of service. And then I handed her a folder. Inside, a motion for injunctive relief. A cease and desist for asset transfer. A petition to vacate the prenup under fraud. And a formal demand for forensic accounting of all shared financial activity since October. Lana went pale. She said, "What is this?" I looked her in the eye and said, "Discovery Day." Lana didn't speak for a full 10 seconds after I handed her the folder. She just stared at the cover sheet, blinking like her brain was buffering. Then she said my name, not in anger, not in fear, but in disbelief. "Ethan, what is this?" I stayed calm. Lawyer calm. Like I was briefing a client instead of confronting the woman who'd been engineering my financial execution behind my back. "It's a legal response," I said, "to the timeline you and Brandon put together. I figured I'd get ahead of mediation." She shook her head. "What are you talking about? What timeline?" I slid my phone across the table. Open screen. Her email. The PDF. The spreadsheet. My annotations. All of it. She didn't even pick up the phone. Just stared at it like it was a live grenade. I debated how much to show her. Part of me wanted to hold back, to use it strategically. But no, I wanted her to feel it. The violation. The exposure. The cold slap of knowing someone had outmaneuvered you before you even got out of the gate. "You left the iPad open," I said. "March 20th. I gave you 18 days to come clean." Her jaw clenched. She stood up, walked to the sink, and turned the faucet on. Just stood there, her hands braced on the edge of the counter, water running. "You went through my private documents," she said. I almost laughed. "You mean the ones outlining how you plan to screw me over legally and financially?" "Yeah, I did." "You had no right." "I wrote our prenup, Lana. You don't think I recognized the language you quoted? You were counting on me being blindsided. And if you'd been a little more subtle, maybe I would have been." She turned off the tap and spun around. "I didn't want it to be like this." "Then why plan it like this?" Silence. We stared at each other across the kitchen island where we'd shared 1,000 quiet dinners. Where she used to eat yogurt and drink green tea and tell me about frustrating clients. Where I thought I'd grow old with someone who saw me as a partner, not a mark. Her voice, when it came, was small. "I didn't think you'd understand." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You didn't think I'd notice." That afternoon, Allison filed the petition. The motion to vacate the prenup on grounds of fraud and bad faith wasn't a bluff. We had a legitimate case. The clause was clear. The evidence was damning. And Brandon? He was about to have a very bad month. I'd had a forensic accountant, Morris Chong, an old colleague, working quietly in the background for over a week. He traced $27,800 in transfers to a savings account under Lana's maiden name, just under reporting thresholds, spaced every other week since December. There were also Venmo transactions labeled reimburse and work expenses tied to her so-called client outings. The paper trail was neat, but not neat enough. Allison was surgical. She drafted a discovery request that would make most people cry. 30 days of communications, device access, and financial statements. We didn't file it all yet. We waited. Because here's the thing about betrayal on paper. It looks a lot like strategy in court. On April 10th, Lana sent a message through her lawyer, a boutique family attorney named Leslie Braham, who clearly didn't realize what kind of case she was stepping into. Leslie suggested initial mediation, claiming it would be less emotionally taxing and more equitable. She called it a collaborative tone. Allison responded with one line. My client is open to mediation after full discovery compliance. That same day, Brandon emailed me. I hadn't expected that. His message was short, self-righteous, smug. Ethan, I hope we can keep things civil. This doesn't need to be ugly. Lana deserves a chance to move on without being punished. Let's be adults about this. B. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because Brandon wasn't just a coworker. He was technically an officer at Lana's firm. And that meant the moment he started advising her on asset separation, while also being personally involved, he crossed into ethical misconduct territory. Possibly even fraud, depending on how deep his influence went. I sent the email to Allison. She flagged it. She smiled. April 15th. I held the nuclear option in my hand. A draft letter to Brandon's firm's ethics board, plus a copy of the internal HR policy Lana's firm published 2 years ago, explicitly banning interoffice relationships between direct collaborators without disclosure. They hadn't disclosed. Lana had introduced Brandon as a peer on external projects during a holiday event. I had pictures, receipts, a statement from one of her old coworkers who thought it was weird that Brandon showed up to team happy hours but never had a company email. What I was building wasn't just a case. It was a timeline of deception. And I wasn't doing it for money. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it because I refused to let them rewrite the story. You don't get to build a campaign against me and call it closure. The mediation was scheduled for May 2nd. Lana didn't know I'd subpoenaed Brandon's digital communication logs through her firm. She didn't know her spreadsheet included enough metadata to confirm exactly when she created it and who she emailed it to, including her personal financial advisor. Allison and I weren't going to throw it all out at once. No, we were going to bleed it slowly. We wanted a clean kill. Not dramatic. Just undeniable. The kind of win that ends careers and reputations with the elegance of a pinstroke. But despite everything I'd found, every calculated move, every breadcrumb of betrayal, there were still moments where I didn't feel victorious. I'd sit in the quiet of our empty bedroom, wondering when she'd started seeing me as a liability instead of a partner. I'd rewatch old videos, her laughing at the beach, us cooking together, and feel this tight ache in my chest. Like I was grieving someone who was still alive. Because the truth is, betrayal doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your sense of reality. And sometimes, legal revenge feels like a cold substitute for the warm life you thought you had. But it's still justice. And I'd take justice over lies any day. The morning of mediation, I woke up before the sun. I didn't need to. The meeting wasn't until 10, and Allison was already prepped. But my body wouldn't sleep. It never does the day a big case cracks open. I brewed coffee in the silence of my now half-empty kitchen. Her favorite mug was still in the cupboard, blue ceramic with a chipped handle she refused to replace. I left it there, not out of sentiment, out of strategy. I wanted little reminders of her plans to stay visible. I wanted to feel the betrayal, so I wouldn't forget why I was doing this. Because it wasn't just about Lana. It wasn't even about Brandon. It was about the way they tried to erase me, like I was an obstacle to work around instead of a man they once smiled at across a breakfast table. I didn't care if she loved him. I cared that she strategized me. Mediation started civilly. That was expected. The firm rented a sleek neutral office in downtown Durham, glass walls, filtered sunlight, overpriced bottled water. Allison and I arrived early. Lana came in 5 minutes late with Leslie, dressed in corporate soft tones, like she was headed to a networking brunch. Her eyes didn't meet mine. I studied her posture. Calm. Controlled. But there was a tension in her fingers, the way they tapped against her notebook. A tell. They opened with pleasantries, then offered the fair and balanced proposal. Lana would keep the house. I'd buy out my share of the equity minus cohabitation credit. She'd waive claim to my Q2 bonus in exchange for full ownership of her premarital savings, never mind the post-marital transfers she conveniently forgot to include. They offered a clean break. Fast. Quiet. Controlled. And then Allison smiled. Let's discuss premeditated fraud, she said, almost sweetly. Leslie blinked. Excuse me. Allison opened a red folder. Nothing dramatic. Just a single page. A printout of the PDF I found on the iPad, complete with date stamps, IP logs, and 2 highlighted phrases. Maximize split post Q1 payout. Act normal until then. Lana's face changed. Not fully, but enough. She knew what was coming. She just didn't know how much I had. Leslie leaned in. What is this? A timeline of calculated financial maneuvering, Allison said, sliding the sheet across the table. Originated from Ms. Mark's email account. Addressed to Mr. Brandon Sloan. We object to that characterization, Leslie said. We expected you would, Allison replied. That's why we've also filed a formal motion to vacate the prenup under Section 4.2. Premeditated asset manipulation. We believe the spreadsheet, along with supporting emails and bank transfers, meet the legal threshold for bad faith planning. Leslie looked at Lana. Lana looked at me. I didn't blink. They called a break. 20 minutes. Leslie pulled Lana into a private room. I didn't move. I let Allison do the talking. She didn't posture. She didn't raise her voice. She just calmly laid out what was coming if we took this to court. A full forensic audit of all marital finances. A formal ethics complaint to Brandon's firm. A subpoena for internal HR emails. A motion to freeze all shared assets pending fraud review. And should it become necessary, a public court filing that would put every detail of their plan on the record. Mediation resumed in a different tone. Leslie spoke first. My client is willing to revisit the asset schedule. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a shift in posture. Allison nodded. We'll accept full liquidation of the house, 50/50ths. Retirement accounts split per original agreement. And my client retains all vested Q2 bonuses without offset. In exchange, we agree to drop the motion and keep discovery sealed. It wasn't what Lana wanted, but it was better than what was waiting in court. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she nodded. And just like that, the slow unravel began. We signed papers that afternoon. Preliminary. Binding. Not final, but enough to lock in the shape of the split. No more strategy. No more secrets. Just consequences. Lana walked out without saying goodbye. She didn't look back. I watched her get in her car and drive away. It felt hollow. Like the end of a meeting you thought would change your life, only to find out you'd already moved on weeks ago. Brandon, however, wasn't as lucky. 3 days later, I submitted the ethics complaint. Anonymous, through a law firm proxy. Just a link to the emails, the spreadsheet, the timeline. Enough to trigger an internal review. And I knew the HR policy like the back of my hand. I'd highlighted it in the letter. Section 9.1. Undisclosed romantic involvement in direct collaborative roles was grounds for disciplinary action, especially when connected to external legal risk. Within a week, Brandon was reassigned. Within a month, he was quietly let go. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I didn't want Lana back. I didn't want an apology. I wanted them to understand that some men watch before they move. And when they move, it's decisive. The final divorce hearing was May 27th. Quick. Clinical. We answered a few questions. The judge signed off. No drama. Afterward, Lana lingered outside the courthouse. Ethan, she said. Can we talk? I paused. About what? She looked tired. Not broken, just worn. I know I handled this badly, she said. But I wasn't trying to ruin you. You weren't trying to ruin me, I said. You were trying to outmaneuver me. It's not the same thing. But it's not that different, either. She flinched, then gave a weak smile. You were always better at language. No, I said. I was just honest with mine. And then I walked away. The house sold a month later. I moved into a loft near the research triangle, closer to work, smaller space, less memory. I switched firms. I picked up new contracts. I started running again in the mornings, like I used to before marriage softened my edges. Some nights, I'd wake up wondering if any of it had been real. But mostly, I slept well. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't fire or fury. It's letting them watch you walk away clean. After the divorce was finalized, the quiet surprised me. Not just the physical quiet, but the absence of Lana's footsteps on the hardwood floors or the sound of her blender every morning at 6:45 a.m. was palpable, but the emotional kind. The absence of tension. No more second-guessing smiles. No more trying to decode late-night emails or suspicious calendar blocks. Just stillness. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the beginning of it. My new place was minimalist by necessity. I hadn't brought much with me. A few essentials. My guitars. The leather reading chair I'd had since law school. No wedding photos, obviously. No framed prints of our first trip to Charleston, or the anniversary hike she insisted we framed despite hating every mosquito-filled second of it. I left the memory markers behind. She could keep them, or burn them. I didn't care. But what I did bring was the fire, not rage, purpose. In late June, Allison invited me to dinner. Not romantic. Just two professionals who'd gone through the trenches together. We met at a small sushi place on Franklin Street, quiet, tucked away, unpretentious. She toasted me with sake. You played it perfectly. I gave a tight smile. I just followed the contract. No, she said. You reclaimed the contract. Most people would have folded when they saw that spreadsheet. You didn't just respond. You executed. We talked shop for a while, mergers, arbitration, the usual. But halfway through the meal, she asked something unexpected. Have you thought about teaching? Law, contract strategy, precedent design. You've got a way of explaining structure like it's storytelling. That's rare. I hadn't. Not seriously. But the idea stuck. By July, I'd picked up a part-time adjunct role at a local university, just one course, strategic contracts and ethical boundaries. The irony wasn't lost on me. I taught 22 students about fiduciary duty, conflict of interest, implied intent. And every time I wrote the word trust on the board, I felt the ghost of Lana's spreadsheet tapping on my shoulder. But teaching gave me a way to process the wreckage without wallowing in it. I wasn't just a husband whose wife betrayed him. I was a strategist who turned betrayal into a blueprint. I was building again. And then, almost predictably, Brandon tried to re-enter the picture. Not with Lana. With me. He emailed me in August. Said he wanted to clear the air. That he'd made mistakes. That he didn't want to carry bad blood into his next professional chapter. I read the email twice, then archived it. No reply. Some people think closure requires conversation. I think silence can be louder. I didn't speak to Lana for months. There was no reason to. No shared accounts. No kids. No emergencies. But on a rainy Thursday in September, I ran into her. Literally. I was at a bookstore near campus, browsing legal thrillers and pretending I didn't know how unrealistic they were. And there she was, in the nonfiction aisle, holding a book about mindfulness and decision fatigue. She saw me first. I could tell by the way her spine straightened. Ethan. Lana. We stood there for a few seconds. Strangers with shared history. Her hair was shorter. She looked thinner. Tired, but softer somehow. I heard you're teaching now, she said. Just a class. That's good. You always explain things better than most people. Maybe, I said. But I missed the signs. She flinched. Just slightly. I'm sorry. For how I handled it. I'm not looking for an apology. I know. I do think about it. I hope you learn from it, I said. That's more useful than guilt. She nodded, almost grateful for the bluntness. And then she surprised me. He left, she said. A few weeks after the ethics inquiry. Said I made him into someone he wasn't. I didn't say anything. What was there to say? That betrayal builds unstable foundations? That co-conspirators aren't lovers, they're mirrors? Instead, I said, that's unfortunate. She gave a quiet laugh. You're cold now. No, I said. I'm clear now. She nodded once. Take care of yourself, Ethan. And just like that, she walked away. That night, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel vindicated either. I felt done. Like a chapter had closed without drama. Without flames. Just a page turned, clean and final. By October, my class was full. I had students emailing me drafts at 2 a.m., asking how to phrase clauses more ethically. Some of them even asked about prenups, how to write them with love and logic. I never told them my story. I never had to. But every time I talked about implied intent, about how planning reveals character more than passion ever could, I was telling them something deeper. You don't have to be betrayed to learn strategy. But if you are, don't just survive. Adapt. Don't just feel the fire. Forge something with it. October turned into November without fanfare. In North Carolina, fall doesn't so much arrive as settle in quietly, like a guest who knows you're not in the mood for company but shows up anyway. The leaves changed. The air thinned. And my life began to take on the shape of after. It's strange how ordinary survival can look. I taught 2 nights a week. I took on 3 new contract clients, including a nonprofit focused on ethical entrepreneurship, a full-circle kind of symmetry I didn't expect. I started meal prepping. I even started sleeping on both sides of the bed again. There were still moments, though. Moments when I'd hear a song on the radio, and my brain would flash a scene I hadn't chosen, her singing along in the passenger seat, legs curled up, windows down. Or I'd open an old document and find a note from a time when we used to co-edit everything, little in-jokes buried in revision comments. Grief, I've learned, isn't linear. It loops. But so does strength. Brandon made another attempt in November. Not directly. Through a mutual acquaintance, Jason, an old colleague from a firm Lana and I used to consult with. Jason and I met for coffee downtown, supposedly to talk contracts. 10 minutes in, he said, so I ran into Brandon. He asked how you were. I stirred my espresso. Did he now? He said he regrets how things went down. I didn't reply. Jason hesitated. He's struggling, Ethan. No job offers have stuck. He said you tanked his career. I looked up. He tanked his career. I just brought the receipts. Jason nodded slowly. Fair enough. We went back to talking contracts. But the message was clear. Brandon was looking for an out. A redemption arc. A reset. I didn't owe him one. Let me be clear. I'm not vengeful by nature. But some people learn best when consequences have duration. And sometimes, protecting your peace means letting others sit in the discomfort they made. Thanksgiving came. I didn't travel. No family gatherings. Just a small dinner with a colleague and her partner, both of whom were kind enough not to ask too many personal questions. We talked politics, college football, Taylor Swift, anything but the past. Later that night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city flicker below. The cold made everything sharper, cleaner. I opened my laptop and drafted a lecture for my final class of the semester, The Ethics of Exit. It wasn't about marriage. Not explicitly. It was about how people leave businesses, partnerships, contracts, and how the way you exit reveals who you were all along. Some leave with respect. Some with premeditated erosion. And some leave pretending it's kindness when it's really control. I ended the lecture with a single sentence. Integrity is most visible in the silence after the door closes. In early December, Lana's name came up again, this time from Allison. We were grabbing lunch at a street taco place near campus. She was in court mode, rapid-fire updates between bites. Then she paused. By the way, Lana's firm is dissolving. I blinked. What? The architecture boutique. 3 partners pulling out. Looks like there was internal strain after Brandon left. One of the investors flagged financial irregularities last quarter. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Karma doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it just quietly recalibrates. I dipped my taco in salsa. How poetic. Allison raised her glass. To poetic endings. Finals week hit like a freight train. Students panicked. Papers flooded my inbox. One of them, a sharp undergrad named Priya, wrote an essay that stopped me cold. She'd written about contractual trust as a mirror, arguing that legal agreements don't just protect us, they reflect us. That what we're willing to put in writing says more than any speech ever could. She ended with this line. What we choose to codify is what we're most afraid to lose. I sat with that sentence for a long time. Because when Lana and I wrote that prenup, I thought we were protecting each other. But looking back, maybe we were just bracing for the inevitable. Maybe the contract wasn't a safety net, it was a symptom. December 22nd. Last day of class. The students clapped. A few stayed behind to shake my hand. One of them, a kid named Malcolm, asked if I'd be teaching again next semester. Depends, I said. You planning on writing another paper that gives me an existential crisis? He laughed. Only if you keep grading like a sniper. I walked out into the chill dusk with a sense of closure that no court could have given me. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about witnessing the full arc of it. The deceit, the dismantling, the quiet rise from the rubble. And then, on Christmas Eve, I got a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A handwritten letter in Lana's script, postmarked from Asheville. It wasn't dramatic. Just 2 pages. She said she was sorry, not for leaving, but for how she left. For the manipulation. The secrecy. She said she thought she could manage the exit cleanly, like a contract negotiation, and hadn't realized until too late that people aren't contracts. She ended the letter with, You always told me clarity was kinder than kindness. I didn't believe you. I do now. I didn't write back. But I folded the letter neatly and placed it in my filing cabinet under a new folder label. Closure. The new year came in quietly. No parties. No countdown. Just a single candle burning on my windowsill and a pot of coffee steeping on the stove. I didn't feel celebratory, and I didn't feel lost. I just felt settled. There's a moment after grief where everything inside you stops vibrating. It's not joy, not yet, But it's the absence of panic, of flinching, the realization that you've stepped out of the blast radius and onto something solid again. That was January for me. Teaching resumed mid-month. My class list filled up in 4 hours. I added a second section, then a Saturday seminar. Word had spread. Professor Marks didn't just teach law, he taught how to read people. My office hours were full of students asking me questions they didn't even realize were personal. How do you know if a clause is manipulative? What's the difference between protection and control? Is it wrong to walk away if you know you're not being honest? I answered them all, without bitterness, without telling them how I'd learned those answers the hard way. Because teaching, I found, was a kind of healing. It turned my scars into curriculum. In February, I signed a publishing deal. It started with a guest lecture that got posted online, The Ethics of Hidden Exit Plans, and somehow went viral among a community of startup founders and divorce attorneys. Within a month, I had offers to write a book. Not about Lana, not explicitly, but about the architecture of betrayal, how strategy can become pathology, how contracts are abused not by the bold, but by the subtle. The title? Quiet Clauses, How We Weaponize Agreements and What That Says About Us. I didn't think of it as revenge. I thought of it as repurposing pain. Lana's name came up less and less. Not because I avoided it, but because she had finally taken up the space she deserved, the past. A closed tab. A chapter with an ending. I heard she moved out to the Blue Ridge Mountains. Started working with a smaller firm. One of our mutuals said she'd begun therapy. Good. I hoped she was doing the work. Not because I cared for her redemption, but because I knew what it meant to carry guilt and confusion and all the brittle weight of self-deception. She had her path. I had mine. And mine was clear. March 3rd. I gave a talk at a regional law symposium in Chapel Hill. Afterward, a woman approached me. Mid-30s. Crisp navy blazer. Sharp eyes. "You're Ethan Marks," she said. "I've read your work." I nodded. "Then you probably know more than you want to." She smiled. "No, I know just enough to want to learn more." Her name was Nia. She was a mediator with a background in restorative justice. We talked for an hour, then walked to a coffee shop nearby. She asked thoughtful questions. She listened with her whole face. She had that rare quality I'd once thought Lana had, the ability to make silence feel safe. We didn't start dating that night, but we exchanged numbers. And the next week, she invited me to one of her workshops. This time, I didn't feel the old need to perform. I just showed up, as myself. By April, the garden on my balcony was blooming. Yeah, garden. Me. The guy who once joked that plants were just responsibility in dirt. I'd started with herbs. Basil. Mint. Then a few wildflowers. Nia had dropped off a planter box after our third dinner. "You seem like someone who needs things that grow slowly," she'd said. She was right. There's something deeply satisfying about tending to something that has no agenda. No spreadsheet. No hidden timeline. Just soil, sun, and time. And sometimes, in the still mornings, I'd look at that old leather chair, the one I brought from the wreckage, and smile. Because I hadn't thrown everything away after Lana. I'd kept the pieces that were mine all along. The chair, the guitar, the sense of structure, the part of me that watched patiently and struck precisely, the part that endured. People always ask me now, would you have done it differently if you'd known? And the answer is, no, I wouldn't change the pain. Because the pain made the silence meaningful. It sharpened me, shaped me, made me more deliberate, more awake. It taught me how to see, not just what people say, but what they build when they think you're not looking. I'm not angry anymore. I'm aware. And sometimes awareness is all you need. So no, I'm not married now. I may never be again. But I am honest. With myself. With others. With my boundaries. I no longer offer blind faith as a default. And I don't mistake kindness for safety. I read contracts for a living. Now, I read people just as fluently. And when I smell betrayal these days, I don't panic. I prepare. Because the next time someone thinks I won't notice the trap they're building, they won't even hear me disarm it. Until they find themselves sitting in the quiet, wondering how the hell I walked away with everything.